Hey, John.
Hey, Barry.
How are you?
I'm all right. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, the volume said it was at minimum level, but I guess it's all right.
Yeah. Well. Hello, Charles. John, tell Linda I appreciate her sending me a text the other day, updating me on what's going on across the street from y'all's house.
Okay.
Because there was, they seem to have come to a standstill, and they can't get all the supplies in. So, so they're not able to. It's about to drive my daughter crazy that they're just stuck. But the suppliers haven't come up with the equipment yet. I mean, with the windows and things like that. So, anyway, but tell Linda I appreciate the update to keep it coming. It's like
Sure.
like having somebody keep an eye on my daughter and her business. That's good. So, Charles, how are you tonight?
Doing fine.
Good, good. Glad you're with us. Glad you're with us. I think like Chuck's having a hard time connecting the audio. But, so John, how what's the rest of your life like these days? You still staying busy? Hey Nick.
Oh, yes, just I was out in Middle Tennessee yesterday for a Masonic thing and got home about 1:30 this morning, so I'm pretty wiped out.
Well, retirement just, it just takes up all your time. Once you start getting into other things, you might as well go back to work.
Yeah.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, Barry.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Hey, William.
Hey, Barry.
Hi. Hey, David.
Howdy there. Greetings from Louisville.
Is Miss Judy with you?
She's in the kitchen cleaning up.
Ah.
She's had a busy day. We're both still doing a lot of volunteer work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question before we get into C.S. Lewis.
Yes, absolutely. What you got?
Are you familiar with this group?
No, I don't think so.
Christie?
Ratio?
They're
No, I don't know it.
campus-based Christian apologetic group. They particularly try to appeal to skeptics and seekers.
What is it called?
RATIO CHRISTI.
Ratio Christi. Yes, I don't know them that well, but yes, I've heard of them. They're a good group.
Yeah, I met Judy and I were doing recruiting for Campus Lions Club, and I met this guy who was recruiting for his group. And so I went over and introduced myself and said, are y'all C.S. Lewis fans? And he said, oh yeah, absolutely. And he asked me what my favorite Lewis book was, and I told him probably Mere Christianity. He said he might invite me to speak to their campus group sometime after I told him I had been involved with the Memphis chapter of the C.S. Lewis Society.
Oh, that'd be good.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Which campus?
As long as they understand I am not an authority on Lewis, just a fan.
Which school is this?
University of Louisville.
Oh, okay.
We started a Campus Lions Club a couple of years ago. They've done several service projects, but since students come and go, it's a lot of hard work. Somebody said it's like playing tennis. You cannot take your eye off the ball.
Yeah.
Chuck, how's it going this year at school?
Here I am.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going fine. I'm teaching face to face. Got less students for some reason. only about 2/3 as many students as I usually have in this class. I guess they're afraid of COVID or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And a few of them have had it. 2 or 3 of them have been out with COVID for a couple weeks. So you got to build your class such that people can come and go at any time and not get messed up.
Yeah, I know that's really tough. I know our granddaughter Lily is on campus there. I doubt you'll have her in a chemistry class, but she's a theater. She's a theater girl. She's not going to go to chemistry if she has a
Okay.
choice. But,
Yeah.
but anyway, if you see a girl that looks kind of like me, it's Lily.
Okay. I don't think I've ever seen her before.
Then she's not like me. She's pretty, but
Her beard's not as white.
that's right.
Right. Hope not. Nick, are you in Texas?
Actually, I'm not in Texas right now. I'm in Bartlett, Tennessee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm keeping Sandy and I are keeping our granddaughter for a week while our daughter and son-in-law are out of town.
No,
But yes, I live in Texas.
Live in Texas?
Yes. I'm going to have to leave after about an hour. I've got another computer thing I've got to do.
Oh, I understand. I was kind of hoping Dennis would be in pretty quickly so that we could have a little conversation about the things that have happened here. I hope everybody had a chance to take a look at the things that are now available. Website, new website, so you have to learn a new name, but we've chosen an easy one, and also YouTube. So hopefully we'll have this meeting posted on YouTube, so we can kind of go back and relive our discussions and hear it again. But really appreciate Dennis and Daryl Parsons for putting so much work into the new publication that is dated September, so it will be available very, very soon for everybody. It's done. It's ready to go. I'm surprised that it is as professional as it is. I'm just thinking back about when me and Dennis were doing it. Now that we got Daryl who knows what he's doing, it's a great improvement. But it's you're going to be very pleased with it, I'm sure.
There's a blog post on your new website, but the publication's not up.
Right. It is not up. We've decided to let Daryl figure out when to do that. It's the decision that was finally made to give it a name was A Chronicle of C.S. Lewis Studies, the official newsletter of the Memphis C.S. Lewis Society. And as I'm just looking through it now, it's got a column by William O'Flaherty, and a nice picture there. A column by Corey Latta, an article rather by Corey, and a column by James Como, and a column by Daryl Parsons on leadership and biblical worldview, and an article by Corey Latta, and then spiritual formation, another article by Dennis Beats. So it's very, very impressive, to tell you the truth. So hope that you take a look at it, and then we do need your writing and your input to this. We have to keep these things going, and we've got a couple of others that we've got ready. We're editing and we're working through. I know that I think mentioned Andy. We're going to do an oldie but a goodie that Andy had written many years ago. That's really very good. So if you have an interest in writing a guest column for one time, or just writing an article, we'll need the plan is to have a popular article every time, and also an academic article. So it's just it's written differently. I'd be writing a popular one rather than an academic one, simply because of my pastoral interests. So but we do need this, and we'll see. We'll expect William to have one every time, James Como to have one time every time, Corey Lato. So they'll be regularly rotated around. So you can expect that. And we want to publish this as at no charge to as many people as we can. So once it's up, please send it around, and then drive them over to our website so that we can get on the mailing list. We just want to be a place where all of this, an exchange of information and ideas can just take place, and hopefully a lot of people will be able to benefit from this work. It's not like a church newsletter. We just get the same thing every time. These are articles that people are producing, and some good scholars in the field, and so we're very excited, very pleased with that. But that will come. So I hope, please take a look at the website. Please take a look at the YouTube page, Narnia.org. The old website is still up right now, but we've just shifted everything to that. That's kind of like, that will go away soon. Any comments or questions?
Well, Barry, I guess I actually didn't know, or I'd forgotten that you guys also have a Facebook group page.
Huh.
And so I just joined that.
Yeah,
So that's a good place to share the different things.
Yeah, Don posts on that a good bit. He that's where he puts all sorts of things that he finds. And
yes, I saw.
He spends his day at Information Central there in that chair, and finds things and posts them for us. So
you know me well.
Yes, I do. So that's a good thing. And Janet Kupo kind of runs the Facebook page. So yeah, thanks for reminding me about that. That's been up for a while, but anyway, I'm certainly glad that everybody's with us, and I think we'll have a few more join us soon.
Barry, on the newsletter, is that limited to C.S. Lewis, or does that include all the Inklings?
All the Inklings, anybody that's in the group, and just as a refresher, that's Lewis and Warney Lewis as well. Chesterton, Charles Williams, Tolkien, Sayers, MacDonald, Joy, E. Nesbitt, Owen Barfield. So any article about any of those people is open. We'd be glad.
What about students of Lewis?
Well, it depends on like you, but
no, I'm talking about actual students. Harry Blameyers.
Oh, I think so. If there's a connection, we're willing to talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we'd love that. Hey, Bill, I hadn't spoken to you. How are you doing?
Okay. Good.
Good.
I'm here.
Glad that you're here. All right. I'm going to pull up our prayer book, and as I'm doing that, if anybody would like to just share a Lewis sighting, if you've got one, please go ahead, and I'll try to find what I'm looking for.
I have one, but I would like to share my screen if that's okay, to show what it is.
Sure.
Okay. Here goes.
I may have to give you permission if that's not done.
Yep, apparently you will.
Okay, I think try it now, Don.
Okay, I think my computer just froze, so all right, here we go. All right. It may take a minute because things are being kind of slow.
They're starting.
Okay. I noticed on Facebook a post from someone, the sheriff of Claiborne County, Arkansas, who, I won't get into the politics, but he's posting a concern about the mask and mainly the vaccine mandate. And in the body of his letter down near the bottom, if you can see it, he makes a quote from Lewis, which I presume, I haven't looked it up, of man. Lewis said this: of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep, his cupidity may at some point be satiated, but those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. So I thought that was fairly interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up to see. I think I've debunked that before. I'm trying to look up my.
I think
I think it's
I
from,
saw that someplace recently. I mean,
Yeah,
in Lewis, but
I
I
think
can't
it's
remember
from,
where I saw it.
I think it's from Willing Slaves of the Welfare State
Yes,
and God in the
yes.
Dock.
Oops,
Yes,
I'm
right.
sorry. I'm so used to things not being not Lewis. That may be
Yeah.
one of the ones that I did confirm as from
Willing
Lewis.
slaves of the welfare state. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, that's where it's
that could
from.
be.
And if
No,
you
I'm-
read that whole article, you'll see just exactly what's going on between the politicians and some of the scientific community right now. That was
No,
written in 1958 too.
So this is from Lewis?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
I
trying to
will-
bring up on mine.
It
Go
is from chapter 4 of God in the Dock,
God in the
page
Dock.
324.
All right. It sounded like something Lewis would say. So if everybody's had a chance to see it, I will stop the share.
Where did you say it was again?
It's chapter 4 of God in the Dock.
Chapter
It's
4.
titled The Humanitarian Theory of Punishment.
Mhm.
Yes, that sounds right.
Okay. Yes. Right. In part 3. Right. Yeah, I just read that not long ago. I can't remember because right away I thought, oh boy, that's today. Not that I'm anti-vaccine, but
Anyone else have a sighting?
Don shared about the movie on the Facebook page. I don't know if
Yeah.
you care about that. That's coming up.
Which movie?
And tickets will be available for Malco starting Monday here in Memphis
And it will be shown in Memphis, Don? Because you had that
Yes.
post that said it wouldn't be shown within.
at the
200 miles.
Paradiso.
Okay.
Which movie?
Most Reluctant Convert,
Oh, okay.
the new one.
Yeah, we saw him do that on stage here in Louisville.
Yeah, I'm still not sure which day it's going to be because I did an email to Malco and they came back and said tickets will be available on Monday. But other than that, I don't know what day it's actually going to show.
We'll be sure and watch the Facebook page for that. And if you get a chance, go see that when it's in the theater. Wear your mask, but I'm sure there won't be a big crowd for that. So, just us Lewis folks. Anything else?
Yeah, I started a mini series podcast with Dr. Charlie Starr on his book, The Fawn's Bookshelf. I'm putting a link to the last episode from this past Monday. If you just click on that, it'll also have a link within the body of the notes to listen to the first one first. But I just go ahead and put a link first for the second one. I'll also pop onto the Facebook page and post it there. But
Okay, good.
it'll be a total of 6 episodes. So the third one goes up Monday, and then Catherine, I can't think of her last name, has wrote a book from spare room to wardrobe, reflections on Narnia with my 9-year-old self, or something of that nature.
Yeah.
So Dr. Sarah Waters, I had her, she already was going to be reviewing the book. And so I asked her to do the interview because I wasn't going to get a chance to read the book. And she had, so that'll come up a week from tomorrow, but tomorrow will be episode 3 for the Fawn's Bookshelf on C.S. Lewis on Why Myth Matters.
Yeah, I was watching, I've been watching it as they've come out. Thank you. It's good stuff. Good stuff. Well, I tell you what, folks.
There's Dennis.
There's Dennis. Let's go ahead with our prayer. And John, if you would,
Can anybody hear me on this?
you're good,
Yeah.
Dennis. We hear
Here
you.
you know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. John, if you would read our prayer and our, I will share that here with us. Colleague from the 15th. 15th Sunday after Trinity. John?
Okay, let us pray. Keep, we beseech thee, O Lord, thy church with thy perpetual mercy, and because of the frailty of man, and because the frailty of man without thee cannot but fail, keep us ever by thy help from all things hurtful, and lead us to all things profitable to our salvation through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Man. Thank you. All right. Hey, Dennis, how you doing?
Doing fine. You?
I'm all right. We've already talked a little bit about the Chronicles. We've talked about the web site. We've talked about the Facebook page, and we've talked about the YouTube channel. So, so we just the only thing we're really curious about is when is Daryl going to put the Chronicle out?
Well, I was talking to Bill Como, and there are a couple of things. First of all, there's still a couple of technical issues that Daryl and Diane need to work out. One has to do with the kind of footnotes that are showing, because they're all light blue Roman numerals, which is just strange. And they don't type it that way, but the software they're using transforms it into that. And so I'm still having them look for a setting that doesn't do that. I guarantee you they didn't make a software that would only do that for footnotes. And the other thing is that anytime there's quoted text, instead of leaving it as is or bolding it out or making it bold, it grays it out, makes it very difficult to read. So until those two things are resolved, I think we're at a standstill, which means probably a few days at best. Also, in talking to Bill, he indicated that once it's ready for publication, he'd like to take a quick look at it, I think, to assess what he did and how it looks and see if there's any errors.
Okay.
So other than that, we're pretty much ready to go. I'm thinking, I don't know when Daryl and Diane will have time. I'm hoping now that they're back from vacation that they can get on it right away. But if they do, I'm thinking probably within the week.
Great. So again,
I can't give you a definitive answer.
Everybody, tell your friends about this and have them just send me their emails. Send it to the Memphis C.S. Lewis site email, and we'll get them on the mailing list. That's how we're just right now. We're just building that mailing list. So we'd like to have hundreds of people get this every time it's out. Well, all right. Well, anything else before we get started? Trying to be mindful of everyone's time tonight. All right. The sermon tonight is forgiveness, and William, I know I've read a little bit about what you had said earlier about this particular sermon. Do you have anything on the top of your head that you can share with us about what we know about the sermon that put it into our collection?
Yeah, I meant to bring up some notes on that. I didn't bring up my original notes, but I remember that it wasn't something that had been published before Lewis's death. And so we didn't have an exact date, but it was, believed to be in the 40s, or as we go along, I might be able to pop up my handout, but that's the only thing off the top of my head that I remember about it.
In the introduction to The Weight of Glory, it says that it was sent to Father Patrick Kevin Irwin on August 28, 1947. for inclusion in Father Irwin's parish magazine of the Church of St. Mary.
Okay, yeah.
That's on, that's in, I guess it's Walter Hooper's introduction on page 23. Of his introduction.
Thank you, Bill.
I guess that's Walter Hooper's introduction.
Yeah, that would be, yeah. I was trying to bring up my Kindle on this computer and it had reinstalled apparently. So it was taking a minute.
I did note that on William, on your particular notes, the set of notes that you had, this was listed as being preached on April 4th, 1943, Headington Quarry Church. And then the notes about that was possibly adapted from Forgiveness, the BBC talk from October 18th, 1942, or On Forgiveness, found in The Weight of Glory, the collection of The Weight of Glory. So,
and actually, the date in the Weight of Glory, the introduction says it was written at the request of Father Patrick Kevin Irwin, who lived from 1907 to 65. It doesn't say when it was written, but it was sent to him on August 28th, 1947. For inclusion in the magazine. So maybe somebody wrote, maybe Lewis wrote it before that and sent it over in 47.
Hooper went on to say that that priest was transferred before it was published, so it never did appear in the newsletter.
Right.
It was looking for. So I don't know how it actually how we actually wound up with it now. But
yeah, it does say it was transferred from the church.
right. I mean, I just think about as a preacher, I just think what it would be like to have to preach to Jack Lewis on Sunday mornings, and just I'll have to leave every day and say, what was that okay? Just ask him, do you think that was okay? And then when you needed something to call on him, you would just have, just a wonderful resource. So since we don't have the sermon in its form that was actually used, like the manuscript, we do get those kind of things occasionally. I thought the best thing to do was to send out the two documents that were mentioned. One, the chapter on From the Weight of Glory on Forgiveness, and the other one just the chapter number 7, book 3, in Christian Behavior. That was the original radio talk. So that was, we have the printed version of that, and I thought, just for the sake of our discussion about forgiveness and Lewis's take on that we would read at least the shorter one tonight, and then we can make a decision if we want to read the longer one later, and maybe do that as an extended discussion of this by taking two different nights to talk about this. So is everybody okay with that? And we'll just do our normal format of going around the group and reading, and then having the discussion. One is fairly short. The other one, I think, so we couldn't get two of them done in an evening, but I think we could get both of them done easily within 2 meetings. Everybody agreeable doing that?
Yes.
All right. Let me pull up and share. This is the shorter one. So yeah, we'll do this one on forgiveness.
Yeah.
So normally how we do this is just simply taking turns reading this, pausing, and having the discussion, kind of a free for all on it. And I certainly invite all of you to participate, interrupt, or just have input or ask a question. We feel very free to do that since we're here among our friends ourselves. So if you do come up with an echo on any of this, let's just mute ourselves and try to control that. So just don't just don't forget and have a lot of extraneous noise in the back. So would somebody like to begin with the first paragraph?
I can do that.
Okay, please, William.
I like this one. So, okay. We say a great many things in church and out of church too, without thinking of what we are saying. For instance, we say in the Creed, I believe in the forgiveness of sins. I have been saying it for several years before I asked myself why it was in the Creed. At first sight, it seemed hardly worth putting in. If one is a Christian, I thought, of course one believes in the forgiveness of sin. It goes without saying. For forgiveness of sins. Okay. But the people who compiled the creed apparently thought that it was part of our belief, which we needed to be reminded of every time we went to church. And I've begun to see that, as far as I am concerned, they were right. To believe in the forgiveness of sins is not merely so easy as I thought. Real belief in it is the sort of thing that very easily slips away if we don't keep on polishing it up.
I'm assuming that everybody is certainly knows about the creed, and we say it every single week at my church, Presbyterian Church in Arkansas, and occasionally we'll have somebody come in and visit with us, and then they'll. It's always funny as I look out at the congregation as we begin to say the creed. You can tell the folks that aren't accustomed to it because they all of a sudden pick up their bulletin, and I'm trying not to embarrass them, so I've always printed it in the bulletin instead of having it in the hymnal and making them look it up. So they kind of look down and say it along with us. But most of the folks in the church just say this just off the top of their head, and like most things in the creed, it's something that I think we can become so accustomed to that we often forget the importance of every particular part of it. The two things I'd say about that. One is that I've always challenged my church people at any church that I've ever pastored. I've often challenged my church people that if I preach a sermon, they need to go through the creed quickly in their heads and find out what particular statement in the creed my sermon relates to. And if I preach a sermon that they can't find a relationship to what the creed is, they need to fire me right then. Because I think that's basically what we're supposed to believe, and it encapsulates that. The other thing I'd say about the creed and the importance of it being said on a regular basis, and Nick, I'm glad that you're here because the reason that I want to mention that is that when I first started my D-Min program, and that was in, well, I don't know when it was now, 1996, something like that. One of the things that Nick asked me to do in his class was to write a foundation, my foundational spirituality. What is your foundation my spiritual foundation? And I really struggled with it because I didn't know what that meant. I went to the library and I kept looking up foundational theology, and I really couldn't find a clear-cut definition of it. And finally, I remember going to you, Nick, and I said, all right, Nick, this is what I think it means. I need to go down to the deepest part of who I am and look at my own spiritual life and decide what's at the bedrock of that. What is it that I have built my whole understanding of Christian spirituality upon? And you said that's exactly what I want you to do. And what I found was at that place was the Apostles' Creed, because I remember even as a child saying that in church, even before I knew what the words actually meant. And so it became such a routine for me that when I could think about anything in the Christian faith, it was the Apostles' Creed. I could say that. And so that was where the foundation really started, with what I knew spiritually. And so I still thank you for that. That was a very important part of my spiritual growth. So when I talk about the creed, that I think we do need to be reminded about it every time. And I've said a lot just to say that I agree with what Lewis says about the need to be reminded about it.
Now, anything we do repetitively can be done after a while without thought. We need to think.
I guess when I read this, the thought that occurred to me, which I never really considered before, the way Lewis is phrasing it, it seems like he's assuming that the creed was written with the intention that it would be recited regularly in church. Is that the case? I thought the creed was written just more or less as a public declaration of, okay, here is what we actually believe. Was there a conscious liturgical purpose for it when it was first put together?
Well, it is part of the Orthodox and Catholic liturgies dating back to very shortly after it was put together. It's been part of the Eucharist service. I don't know exactly how soon after it was put together, but it's been a part of it since the early Middle Ages at the very latest.
I think we have to distinguish between the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed, because the Nicene Creed was hammered out over several centuries, and that is the great ecumenical creed of the church. The Apostles' Creed is really a Western creed.
And it's shorter.
Yes.
Nicene Creed is the standard in both the Orthodox and in the Catholic and Anglican traditions.
Yes. Of course, the Filioque clause is an issue for the Orthodox.
Mm-hmm. For me, I always have found that I'd like to have my book open when we do the creed and read it, because there always is a phrase or a statement that stands out to me. I like looking at the words because it helps me parrot it the same way every week, but looking at it consciously, reading it as I'm saying it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And it's interesting, all the years that I was a Protestant, it was the Apostles' Creed that I memorized, that I just knew, by heart. And even though I say the Nicene Creed every week now at Sunday Mass, I still want to be sure I have every phrase in the Nicene Creed just as it is, because that Apostles' Creed is still there in my mind all the time. So I need that Nicene Creed in front of me. Yeah.
Couldn't we also say that Lewis says here that this phrase is in there so people can be reminded, but couldn't we say that every phrase is there so you be reminded of it? Because they're all important.
Yeah.
You can't be a Christian basically without all of them, right?
Well, that's Lewis's point.
But he just talks about forgiveness.
Well, he does, but in there he says, I can't. It's right in here near the beginning somewhere, but it has to do with the idea that it seems like something that is so obvious that it shouldn't have to be said.
Yeah. Well, but the people who think they're obvious too.
Well, yeah, that's the point. He said, but the people who formulated the creed thought it was important enough that we should be reminded of it in every service, and therefore he's implying that every part of the creed is there because it's important enough. We should all be reminded. So Lewis definitely agrees with your reading of it.
Yeah.
And really, the forgiveness of sins is there because that has to do with the atoning death of Christ. I mean, our sins are taken into death with him. So when we say we believe in forgiveness of sins, we're saying that we believe that Christ died for our sins, with our sins. He's buried them in the grave. And so it's very much a part of the whole understanding of the atonement.
Good point.
My original question was, again, Lewis seems to assume that the creed was put together intentionally to be part of the liturgy. And I had never really thought about that. I just thought that it was something that was put together, and then people said, hey, that's good, and decided to use it. So that was my question, is was the intent of putting it together so that we would be reminded every time we went to church, as Lewis said?
When you asked your question originally, John, you gave a phrase that was important, I think. And you said you thought it was merely written as a formal statement, public statement of our belief. That's what the creed was. It was a formal public statement of our belief. And as such, it makes sense that it would be written to be said in church in every service, because there is nothing more public than stating in your service, this is what we believe. So my guess is it had that liturgical intent from the beginning. But again, it's merely a guess.
And I think it got into the liturgy, if not directly in, being installed in the liturgy. I think because the creed was associated with baptism.
Right.
And because the saying of the creed when you baptism is the reaffirming our own faith while along with the ones who are being baptized. But that'd be interesting thing to look at and see when the creed actually did wind up in the liturgy. I don't have a definite answer on that.
I know that in the baptismal rite in the Catholic Church, if somebody who is of age is being baptized, or if an infant's being baptized, then his parents and sponsors have to answer, but they have to answer to the creed in a question and answer format. That is, the officiant asks the question, do you believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth? You have to say, I do. Then you talk about Jesus, and you go right down the creed. They have to answer that. So that's the entrance right into the church.
That's the format now used in the Methodist Church too. Question and answer.
Mm-hmm. The something that strikes me in this, and again, I have no basis for it except my own intuition, but it strikes me that to have gone to all the trouble of formulating this and debating it and arguing and deciding what to put in, what to leave out, that if it wasn't intended with a liturgical purpose, it's almost a pointless document.
Well, another approach is to ask what heresies were floating around that the creed attempts to shoot down. Right. And I'm not that much of a church historian to know, but I know that that's the way many of our statements of faith arise, just like laws. Every law is based on some infraction.
There's a whole long list of heresies going on in those days.
Yeah, but the Aryan Heresy, I mean, that was the big debate, was over the Aryan Heresy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Nicene Creed is specifically against several heresies. The Apostles' Creed, if I remember though, was originally based on the old Roman Creed, which developed in the church in Rome on the earliest example we have of it is, which bishop was it? Hippolytus or somebody left the creed in Rome as a testimony to his own orthodoxy. And that seemed to be the basis of the Apostles' Creed. But the Nicene Creed, clause by clause, is really attacking heresy. Arianism, Nestorianism, Eutychianism, clause by clause.
Yeah, Google, which of course can never be wrong, is that the present text is similar to the baptismal creed created in the church in Rome in the 3rd and 4th centuries. It reached its final form in southwestern France in the late 6th or early 7th century.
Now that's the Apostles' Creed.
Right.
Yes, right. The Nicene Creed, the Creed of Nicaea, was voted on by the Council of Nicaea in 325, was slightly modified in 381 at the Council of Constantinople. They put in more about the Holy Spirit then. And then at the Council of Ephesus, they had a statement about Mary as Theotokos, which wasn't part of the Nicene Creed. And then at Chalcedon in 451, you had the Chalcedonian Christological Statement, which is a one-paragraph commentary on the second clause of the Nicene Creed. And the key thing in that was that the phrase homoousios and the phrase Theotokos were both included in that Chalcedonian definition. That is, of the same substance, Father, Son, and Spirit, and Theotokos, Mary as God-bearer, or Mater Dei, Mother of God in Latin. So that was a commentary on the Nicene Creed, the Chalcedonian Christological Statements.
When you may have already said this, and I sort of dropped out for a moment, but which creed is Lewis talking about here? The Apostles or the Nicene?
I think we assume the Apostles'
The
Creed.
Apostles' Creed.
I would say the Apostles' Creed, yeah.
Well, I just looked up online the Anglican version, and unless it's changed since the 40s when Lewis wrote this, it doesn't mention, I believe, in forgiveness of sins.
Right before the resurrection?
It says, hold on.
I think the Anglican Church uses the Nicene Creed.
They do.
So is Lewis meaning the Nicene or the Apostles? Because of course the phrase is both.
On the Anglican website, it says we acknowledge one baptism for the forgiveness of sins.
Is that using the contemporary service or the traditional service that Lewis would have been using?
It says last updated in 2017.
That's
Nicene
the new
Creed.
one. That's the new one.
That's funny.
They might well have left it
Creed
out.
was last updated in 2017. That's kind of funny, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on. Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Let's move on with that one. Who wants to read the second paragraph? We believe.
I will, because I don't want to read the third one.
Okay. All right, David.
We believe that God forgives our sins, but also that he will not do so unless we forgive other people their sins against us. There's no doubt about the second part of the statement. It is the Lord's Prayer. It was emphatically stated by our Lord. If you don't forgive, you will not be forgiven. No part of his teaching is clearer, and there are no exceptions to it. He doesn't say that we're to forgive other people's sins, provided that they're not too frightful, or provided that there are extenuating circumstances, or anything of that sort. We are to forgive them all, however spiteful, however mean, however often they're repeated. If we don't, we shall be forgiven none of our own.
All right, reactions.
I think that's very scary, and that most people just gloss over that when they're saying that prayer and don't even think about it.
I think you're right. Yeah, again, anything we do repetitively can become such a habit that we do it without much thought. I preached last week on communion.
I'm not sure that's the reason people gloss over that.
Well, that too.
The hard part for me with the part about forgiving other people is I've struggled with forgiving people who are who the kind of people who do things and they refuse to admit they've done something wrong, and they keep doing that thing to other people, but we're called to forgive them even though they are not repentant. Not necessarily that they're going to ever gain anything by our forgiving them, but we need to forgive them. And that's the part I've struggled with.
Yeah.
Well, that is an interesting question. I was talking to someone once who essentially said you could not forgive someone unless they asked to be forgiven. So I've heard 2 points of view on that forgiveness is, in a sense, I'm not going to try to say the Greek word, monergistic, I guess. It's something that you do on your own, regardless of the other person's reaction. And then I've heard it more as a transactional view of saying, if they want to be forgiven, then you forgive them. But if they don't confess their sin and ask to be forgiven, you're under no obligation to forgive them. So your thoughts on that?
Well, you know,
Well,
Jesus.
That's exactly where I'm going here. So.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, Jesus on the cross says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Now, the issue, I struggle sometimes when I think about that, because, okay, they don't know what they're doing, so I'm supposed to forgive them. But what happens if somebody really knows what they're doing? They know that it's evil, but they do it anyway.
They're not repentant.
Yeah, I mean, and well, these people are, I mean, these people who don't know what they're doing, they're not repentant. I mean, the people that are crucifying Jesus aren't repentant, but he says, I forgive them. What about when they know what they're doing? I don't know. That's just a hard.
Well, for me, the struggle has been that the people who are fellow Christians, people who are in the church, people who are leaders in the church or in the ministry or something, who do hurtful things to other people and do not recognize it, do not acknowledge it, do not repent of it. I found that I've had to forgive those people in those situations, because if I don't, it's too easy to let the anger, righteous or otherwise, build up, and that's not good for my spiritual life or my my anything.
Yes, I agree with you there. I think you're exactly right. I mean, not to forgive may not hurt the other person, but not to forgive surely hurts me. You know, I know it messes me up.
Well, what drives me, the thing that convinces me that it doesn't really matter the other person, but that Jesus died on the cross for all the sins that were committed against me, as well as for the sins that I commit. He died for the sins that were committed against all these other people.
Right.
And
if I don't forgive, I'm somehow trying to abrogate the work of Christ on the cross. I don't want to do that.
Good point. Good point, Janet.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
You know, and one thing that just pops into my head at different times in my life, early on especially, I would do things, and then later, years later, sometimes said, "Well, you know, that was really, I shouldn't have done that."
Yes.
I mean, it was like I didn't realize that I had created angst or hurt or done something that I shouldn't have done until much later, and yet God looks at me and I think with enough grace and says, "Absolutely, I forgive you." I mean, you're not there yet. You haven't asked for everything, but I'm forgiving you already. So
that's right, Barry. Yeah.
Yeah.
My reaction is a quote from a movie in which somebody's doing something and he looks at a fellow that's with him and says, "Stoneberg, you can either watch me or join me. One of them is more fun." The idea of the transactional view that you were talking about, John, requiring the other person to actively participate in your forgiveness, confuses what Lewis talks about a little further on, the difference between forgiving and excusing. Yeah. And the same thing I would say holds true to people who are in full knowledge of what they do and not repentant. You don't excuse that, but you still are required to forgive it.
It raises the question of what is the greater need? The offender's need to be forgiven, or the offended's need to forgive? Just like sometimes
it's that giving love, give love, and not get love.
Yeah, you know, sometimes in the calling for the offering in church, I'll mention that. Yeah, the church needs your money, but you have a greater need to give than the church has a need to receive.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go.
One last thing on that.
You don't know well, if you're forgiving somebody, if you forgive somebody, there's that's a spiritual act, and it's an effective act. It doesn't only do something for you or something. Your forgiveness goes out to meet that person, and it somehow sets that person free from a debt that they owe you. And so it helps them to eventually meet that forgiveness, or it gives them a grace to help them meet that forgiveness.
Yeah.
So it's important to that person too, not just to you.
Yeah.
Was there another comment?
Yeah, and it's related closely to what Janet just said. It may turn out to be pretty much the same thing, that if your motivation to forgiving someone is what you get out of it, you're not forgiving them.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not a matter of which is more important, their need for forgiveness or your need to forgive. They're inextricably tied together, and the motivation needs to be the generosity, or the duty, rather than generosity, the duty to forgive.
Point.
And not only does it release the person who needs forgiveness, even though they didn't ask for it, but it releases you from recriminations, from revenge motives, and it releases you to love.
You know, I guess all of us have had something in our lives that, well, maybe not all of us, but I know I have, that where someone I haven't seen in such a long time, just kind of out of the blue finds me and apologizes, and I don't even remember what it was that they thought they did, and it was like, well, that's okay, but it was a burden on them, and I don't, whatever it was, I'd already moved on from it a long time ago. Didn't even hold the grudge, and so you just feel you just wonder. I mean, how they've been held captive by that weight until they could come to that point, and yet I had to put any effort into it. I tell the story. Many years ago, we had General Assembly meeting in Birmingham, and it must have been 80. Wow, it must have been 84, something like that, 1984. And we have some good, strong Cumberland Presbyterian churches in Japan, and there was a debate on the floor of General Assembly that had to do with nuclear power, and this old guy, old American guy from Oklahoma, he was a vet, and he got really involved in this discussion about how important it was that we would, use nuclear energy for the world's peace. And he talked about being in World War II, and he said, and we dropped that bomb on those Japs, and that ended World War II. And the Japanese commissioners were out there, and one could speak English and the other one couldn't. And so he kept translating this to the guy who couldn't speak English. And all of a sudden, everybody stood up, like out of order, point of order. Don't say that. I can't believe you said we bombed those Japs. And so this guy was just horrified that he had gotten out of control and said this about the Japanese, when they had 2 Japanese Christian delegates there. And the next morning, and we just dismissed the meeting at that point, because it was horrendous to everybody. And the next morning, first order of business, that guy from Oklahoma was standing up on the podium, and the 2 Japanese commissioners were on the podium, and one could speak English and the other couldn't, like I said. And the guy from Oklahoma said, I'm so sorry, that was emotional. I love you. I ask you for your forgiveness. I was totally out of order, and I'm sorry. And the Japanese fellow who could speak English turned to the other one, translated it, and the guy who couldn't speak English came over and just hit the old guy on the shoulder like a love pat, and he says, "Oh, that's okay." And that was how it ended. That's all he said. "Oh, that's okay." And that was all it was. And you just felt like that's what this has to be. Forgive and be forgiven. It was necessary for him to confess, but it was okay with the other guy. He just said, "We're Christians. I love you." And that's an important aspect of what we're talking about. Okay, anybody want to read the third paragraph? Besides David Moose.
If you want to split it in half, the midpoint is after the phrase "be a mixture of the two."
Okay. All right. Who's reading?
I can read it.
Okay, Don.
Now, it seems to me that we often make a mistake, both about God's forgiveness of our sins and about the forgiveness we are told to offer other people's sins. Think at first about God's forgiveness. I find that when I think I'm asking God to forgive me, I'm often in reality, unless I watch myself very carefully, asking him something quite different. I'm asking him not to forgive, but to excuse me. But there is all the difference in the world between forgiving and excusing. Forgiveness says, yes, you've done this thing, but I accept your apology. I will never hold it against you, and everything between us two will be exactly as it was before. But excusing says, I see that you couldn't help it or didn't mean it. You really weren't to blame. But if one was not really to blame, then there is nothing to forgive. In that sense, forgiveness and excusing are almost opposites. Of course, in dozens of cases, either between God and man or between one man and another, there may be a mixture of the two. Part of what seemed at first to be the sins turn out to be really nobody's fault and is excused. The bit that is left over is forgiven. If you had a perfect excuse, you would not need forgiveness. If the whole of your action needs forgiveness, then there was no excuse for it. But the trouble is that what we call asking God's forgiveness very often really consists in asking God to accept our excuses. What leads us into this mistake is the fact that there usually is some amount of excuse, some extenuating circumstances. We are so very anxious to point these out to God and to ourselves that we are apt to forget the really important thing. That is the bit left over, the bit which the excuses don't cover, the bit which is inexcusable, but not, thank God, unforgivable. And if we forget this, we shall go away imagining that we have repented and have been forgiven when all that's really happened is that we have satisfied ourselves with our own excuses. They may be very bad excuses. We are all too often easily satisfied about ourselves.
As in the title of that book, yes, Lord, I have sinned, but I have many excellent excuses. Written, I think, by one of our Methodist bishops.
My problem with this is the part about, well, interestingly, it does appear that in this instance, at least, Lewis is assuming an interaction with the person and that the offender has in fact apologized. But the part that really bothers me about this, I can get the "I will never hold it against you," but the next phrase I have extreme difficulty with, and everything between us two will be exactly as it was before. That I really can't handle. I can say to someone, I will not pursue doing something bad to you because of what you have done. But to say I can feel the same way I felt and I can always interact with you the same way I did before, that's hard.
Not meant to be easy.
Well, I think he's talking here about full forgiveness with where you've overcome that part that's hard. I don't think he's talking. I think he's giving like the 100% forgiveness, you know, and especially since he's talking about the context of God forgiving us. And what we're asking of God is not really this, is not really forgiveness, but there's this other thing. Excusing says, I see what you really couldn't help it or didn't mean it. You weren't really to blame. We're looking for God to say that to us more than
Yeah,
God.
but Charles, that's not what he's saying. He's talking about us forgiving others. And it's not intended, it's not intended to be easy. If it was easy, anybody could do it. There'd be no need for any of this.
But this whole
But
paragraph, God's forgiveness of us.
It is, but it's saying we're never going to be forgiven if we don't forgive others.
Yep.
It's the whole purpose of this entire sermon.
Okay. So in John's, because I get this. All right. I let you babysit for my child, and you harm my child. I can forgive you, but everything won't be the same because I will never let you take care of my child again.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. That's it. Yeah. It's like if somebody.
And I don't think that's just stupid.
You would never invest in somebody who took your money before. Yeah.
I think an issue here is, how is feeling involved in forgiveness? I mean, I don't think we can control our feelings that much. I mean, we still have bad feelings against this person, but how are we going to, we got to forgive this person anyway. And that's the battle, I think, that goes on internally. At least it does in me.
Wait, yeah, because feelings cannot be the determining factor in any way.
Exactly right. Cannot be.
And because if you had to have the feelings, God could not require you to do it, because you can't make feelings.
Right.
He wouldn't ask us to do something we can't do.
Well, and sometimes related to this question of not being able to go back to the way things were, sometimes the other person, you can forgive them, but their behavior, their way of being is not changed enough that you could trust them entirely. Right. I think of the example I think of is with my father. My father, I've forgiven him years ago for all the things that he and I had problems when I was a teenager. But there are some things that, you know, I would never be able to go on a camping trip with him, because it puts us into a situation where both of us are too stubborn and pigheaded, and there would be conflict. And so there are certain things we've done instead of doing the things that would go put us into conflict. We've done other things that have allowed us to build a relationship outside of the conflict. But we know that there are certain situations it just wouldn't work, because I am who I am and he is who he is. And no matter how hard we try, there are some weaknesses in our, but it's forgiven. All that stuff in the past. It's just we avoid creating new situations that would be problematic.
Yeah, and you know, as much as I really understand that, and I'm with you. I mean, I'm there. I just, as I think about God forgiving me, it just doesn't work when it gets to that place, does it? I mean, it's like, yeah, I'll trust you again. I'll trust you again. I'll trust you again. And that relationship is not hindered by that. And it just shows, you know, there's a huge gap between what we are and what God is. Yep. God would look at us and say, well, yeah, it's all clean. Let's start again. Let's start again.
Well, I don't know that that's true, Barry. Because God may have given us something and we may have misused it, and he may never give us that thing again. I mean,
I mean, that could be.
And does God trust us? I mean, I think that's a question too. I mean,
well, I guess maybe not trust. Maybe that's not the right word, but it's like, let's get it all clean again. You can't. Maybe God has to say to us, you can't do that because of what you've done. You won't be able to do. I mean, the consequences of your choices and your sin will preclude you from doing that. But still, I see you as righteous.
right. Yeah.
Seems to me we're conflating a lot of things with forgiveness here. I mean, there's excusing, and there is, I wish Lewis had phrased that differently. Yes, you've done this thing, but I accept your apology. I will never hold it against you. And everything between the two of us will be exactly as it was before. I will never hold what you did against you. Yes, that makes perfect sense. But that last clause seems to me he took an extra step that he shouldn't have taken. It's not that you're holding against him what was done. It's whether you can trust him not to do it again. You're not holding the one instance against that person, he or she, but you also recognize that it happened once. Could it happen again? And since you're forgiving without qualification and without any promises on the part of the person you're forgiving, there's a difference between that trust level and being the same as it was before, in the sense that I will treat you as though that one instance never occurred, although I will now be suspicious about future actions. It's not an easy concept at all, and I'm sort of lost.
John's not going to get to babysit Janet's baby.
My baby's 32.
Grandbaby.
Never.
Yeah, never.
I hardly would even let myself babysit my grandchildren this day and age.
Yeah, these are heavy questions, heavy issues.
They are.
I'm going to have to go here.
Okay.
I have another appointment coming up, but I've really enjoyed this. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Great to
Thank you
see
for
you
joining
again.
us, Nick.
I figure out how to get out of the screen now. I'll get out of
Just
it.
keep clicking buttons. That'll happen.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Anytime you see an X, click it.
It's
Yeah.
down at the bottom, Nick. Pull your cursor down toward the bottom. It'll pop up. There'll be a red button on the right that says leave.
Oh, I see it. Good. All right. So long, guys.
Fairly well.
Bye.
Hey, Nick.
Well, all right. Let's move on. There are 2 remedies for this danger. Who's up to read?
I can read that.
Okay, Bill.
There are 2 remedies for this danger. One is to remember that God knows all the real excuses very much better than we do. If there are real extenuating circumstances, there is no fear that he will overlook them. Often he must know many excuses that we have never thought of, and therefore humble souls will, after death, have the delightful surprise of discovering that on certain occasions they sin much less than they thought they had. All the real excusing he will do. What we have got to take to him is the inexcusable bit, the sin. We are only wasting time by talking about all the parts which can, we think, be excused. When you go to a doctor, you show him the bit of you that is wrong, say a broken arm. It would be a mere waste of time to keep on explaining that your legs and eyes and throat are all right. You may be mistaken in thinking so, and anyway, if they are really all right, the doctor will know that.
Okay.
All right. What the most frightening thing about that is when he knows many excuses that we've not even thought of. Yeah, that's a hit right there.
Why is that? Why do you find that frightening?
Why is that frightening?
I mean, just the fact that God is aware more than I am of all the things I've got going against me.
Yeah, you knew that.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's like, God, please show me all this stuff. Not that I want to know it, but that I need to get rid of it.
Wait.
That's
now
the opposite.
now you've gone a step beyond. God, please show me that. God, you know it. Let it go. Thanks.
No,
and God, show me all this stuff. I don't know about that.
I have, show me my sins if I have any wicked way within me.
No. You're saying show me the excuses.
Now that's a different thing. Here he's saying that God knows the excuses, and so he knows if something is really less sinful than we think it is.
Right.
So that's not the way I read that, though. I mean, I read it as like, these are the things about you that created this problem. That you would say, this is what.
No.
It could be things about other people.
All right, say that again.
It could just be the situation that you were in. I mean, it doesn't necessarily. I don't know.
Well, that's the next paragraph. This one is just saying that God's more aware of our excuses than we are, and that's good news for us.
The next paragraph deals with what you're talking about, I think, Barry.
Okay, all right.
Because here, if you were talking about God, show me this, he'd be showing you all those excuses you'd never thought of before, giving you more of a more cards to play in your defense.
Okay.
One of the things I like about Lewis is his consistent approach that God loves us and cares more about us than we understand, and that God is more forgiving and more loving than we understand. And that's something I picked up years ago when I was first reading through Lewis's theological writings, is this sense of God loving me and accepting me and forgiving me and all of that in ways beyond anything I could understand. That's something that, to me at least, that's what I've gotten from Lewis, is that persistent, which of course I think is one of the influences of McDonald on him. But that's another story.
Okay. Well, thanks for that insight. That's good. Any other comments?
Next paragraph.
Okay. Who's up?
I could read this one.
Okay, Chuck.
The second remedy is really and truly to believe in the forgiveness of sins. A great deal of our anxiety to make excuses comes from not really believing in it, from thinking that God will not take us to himself again unless he is satisfied that some sort of case can be made out in our favor. But that would not be forgiveness at all. Real forgiveness means looking steadily at the sin that is left over without any excuse, after all allowances have been made, and seeing it in all its horror, dirt, meanness, and malice, and nevertheless being wholly reconciled to the man who has done it. That and only that is forgiveness, and that we can always have from God if we ask for it. And I think if we give it, as Lewis said earlier.
Amazing grace.
Can anybody think of a situation where that second sentence there has been made real? A story of someone?
Well, once R.C. Sproul gave an example. He said a man came to him, I think it was a man, and he said, I just can't feel forgiveness for my sins. I ask God to forgive me, and I ask him again and again and again, and I just don't feel forgiven. I confess my sins over and over, and I don't feel forgiven. What should I do? Sproul said, you need to get right down on your knees right now and confess your unbelief, your sin of unbelief to God. And he said, but I've been confessing my sin over and over. And he said, no, I mean, you need to confess your unbelief that God has forgiven you. He has forgiven you, but you've added a new sin that you don't believe he's forgiven you. And I think that's what's going on here, is that we don't really believe that God truly forgives us. We don't believe in his forgiving nature. And that's why we try to make excuses.
And why some people suicide.
Yeah.
You know, this not being able to feel forgiven is exactly the same thing as Lewis when he was a child, thinking that he had to have this realization before his prayers would be sufficient when he was saying his night prayers, which really led to him losing his faith. I mean, or he was glad when he lost his faith because he didn't have to try and have those realizations anymore. It's that thinking that we have to have these feelings that gets us in trouble.
And there's another wing to this building as well. Something I read somewhere where two guys are talking, and one of them realizes that a teenage boy has killed someone. No. It's that a father has killed himself. A person has committed suicide, who was very ill and in a great deal of pain, and trying to relieve his wife of the responsibility of caring for him through those last stages of illness. He'd killed himself. And the son is trying to hide the fact that his father killed himself because he's afraid the church will not let him
Receive a Christian
burial. And the sheriff makes the statement when he's figured out what's going on. He said, I'm going to put this down as open, and I'll take a hit on my closed cases. But he said, you don't have to worry. Your daddy was a good man. He's not going to hell over this. The idea that it's a balance sheet, and the positives have to outweigh the negatives. That's a part of this paragraph too, I think. In fact, a part of that sentence. Our excuses come from not really believing in forgiveness because we think that God will not take us to himself unless he is satisfied that some sort of case can be made in our favor. In other words, Lord, I know I did this, but look at all the good I've done. Surely that outweighs this. It's different approaches to the same thing, it seems to me.
Reminds me of when I was a docent on the Ramses exhibit. I realized that I was looking at one point, a hieroglyphic of the final judgment of a dead person. And there was a balance scale in the hieroglyphic, and it showed the heart of the dead person on one side and a feather of truth on the other. And if it balanced out, that was great. You went on to bliss. And if it didn't, you got eaten by the crocodile god. So it's a very old idea that things balance out.
And what Lewis is speaking against here, but recognizing that a lot of people, if they don't take their faith really seriously, a lot of people live their lives as though that was the reality.
Okay, anything else on this one? All right. Anybody want to go next?
I can do that one.
Okay, John.
When it comes to a question of our forgiving other people, it is partly the same and partly different. It is the same because here also, forgiving does not mean excusing. Many people seem to think it does. They think that if you ask them to forgive someone who has cheated or bullied them, you are trying to make out that there was really no cheating or no bullying. But if that were so, there would be nothing to forgive. They keep on replying, but I tell you, the man broke a most solemn promise. Exactly. That is precisely what you have to forgive. This doesn't mean that you must necessarily believe his next promise. It does mean you must make every effort to kill every taste of resentment in your own heart, every wish to humiliate or hurt him or pay him out. The difference between this situation and the one in which you are asking God's forgiveness is this. In our own case, we accept excuses too easily. In other people's, we do not accept them easily enough. As regards my own sins, it is a safe bet, though not a certainty, that the excuses are not really so good as I think. As regards other men's sins against me, it is a safe bet, though not a certainty, that the excuses are better than I think. One must therefore begin by attending to everything which may show that the other man was not so much to blame as we thought. But even if he is absolutely fully to blame, we still have to forgive him. And even if 99% of his apparent guilt can be explained away by really good excuses, the problem of forgiveness begins with the 1% of guilt which is left over. To excuse what can really produce good excuses is not Christian charity. It is only fairness. To be a Christian means you forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you.
Yep.
And that's specifically what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about not trusting someone versus forgiving them.
Right. Doesn't mean you have to believe his next promise. Yeah, right.
It doesn't mean you have to trust your grandchild with them again.
Yeah, right. Yeah, doesn't mean that.
You know, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by that next to the last sentence. To excuse what can really produce good excuses is not Christian charity. It is only fairness. I need to sit with that a while. I don't disagree with it at all. It just seems like that's saying something that needs to be said more often, especially for people in the church, where I think they're assuming that they are forgiving folks, and in probably in reality, anybody, Christian or not, would take a look at that, look at the situation and say, well, you know, that they shouldn't be to blame for that. I mean, part of it anyway.
Well, it's saying more than that. It's saying that there is no blame. Anything that has a good excuse, there's nothing to forgive. That's excusing. It's not forgiving.
Yeah, but I'm talking about I'm talking about how he calls it fairness.
It is fairness, and it doesn't require anything Christian about it.
And that's what I'm thinking. I mean, that sounds like something that needs to be said to more people.
Oh, it does.
What they're assuming that they're doing as a Christian act is truly just fairness among all people, when they would probably recognize that.
Needs to be said to a ton of people, starting with me.
Yeah, so I get that.
And the last sentence in that paragraph certainly is if we think there's something that we just can't possibly forgive, that's what we have to think about. That God has forgiven the inexcusable in us.
I think he's saying here somewhat the same as St. Paul said, not to think of ourselves more highly than we ought.
Right.
Because he's saying we can really think we're a very good, forgiving person when all we're doing is just recognizing that there really is nothing to forgive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me pat myself on the back because I forgave you because doggone, you proved yourself right. I'm sorry.
That's good.
All right. Well, we're at the last paragraph. Who hasn't read
Hey.
it besides me? Anybody want to go?
I haven't read.
Okay. Why don't you cover the last one then?
This is hard. It is perhaps not so hard to forgive a single great injury, but to forgive the incessant provocations of daily life, to keep on forgiving the bossy mother-in-law, the bullying husband, the nagging wife, the selfish daughter, the deceitful son. How can we do it? Only I think by remembering where we stand, by meaning our words when we say in our prayers each night, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. We are offered forgiveness on no other terms. To refuse it is to refuse God's mercy for ourselves. There is no hint of exceptions, and God means what he says.
No hint of exceptions.
We know that's a sermon because that's a sermon ending.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, I like those last 5 words.
Yeah. God means what he says.
This sounds like something that came straight out of the Great Divorce. The bossy mother-in-law, bullying husband, and all of that. And
Yeah.
how the spirits reacted when they met those who had been to them like that.
Well, it does. It comes straight out of the Great Divorce. It comes straight out of mere Christianity. It comes straight out of that hideous strength. It just
in the 4 loves, is that where X is?
Yeah.
You know, X is causing the problem.
Yeah. The fact is, what Lewis is talking about here has to do with whether we're really Christians. And to be really Christian, we have been given the essence of Christ as our being. It's what's described happening to Jane Studdock in the garden in that hideous strength. She comes into a person or the presence of a person, and there's nothing in between to buffer it. And she feels the thing that she has called I her entire life falling away into a great distance. And the real me is something different, something that is not fully formed and yet is demanded. It's talking about the salvation of the soul, where your old self is dying and falling away, and your new self, the essence of God himself, is being born in you. What he's saying here about forgiveness is if we don't forgive, then the essence of Christ is not our core.
Very good.
Everything Lewis does is tied to that idea of what is a Christian. And his idea of a Christian is it's someone who has taken on the essence of God and has to live out their daily lives, helping that grow, but also recognizing that they're not fully there yet. And that is not an easy task.
But he is so right here. It is the daily small things that are the hardest.
Especially when they're done by people who persist in doing them and are not necessarily seeking forgiveness for them.
Right.
Doesn't that go back to Jesus saying, don't just forgive 7 times, but 70 times 7?
Yeah.
If he does it over and over and over again, that's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but you have to forgive all that time.
I was thinking of that passage in the Gospels when we were reading this paragraph.
Yeah.
Does the people know? Do you all know Francis Chan? Who that is? A writer, a preacher, and he's got a new book out that I'm in the process of reading. It's just been out a few days, I guess, called Until Unity, and what he was talking about. Being completely committed to Christ and the things that Christ asks us to do, and he just said something, and I can't quote it, but it just said something like, let's just say Zacchaeus, who when Jesus met him, he decided that he would give away, pay back everything that he had taken, and then give away 4 times that to other people that he had wronged. He just said, I'm committed. Nothing matters but this. And let's say that Zacchaeus and the rich young ruler who walked away from Jesus, being sad because Jesus told him to give everything away, what if they were in the same Sunday school class or study group? And what this conversation would look like between the two. And that image certainly intrigued me. And it sounds like this is, as I read this, when we say in our prayers every night, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, but we're offered forgiveness on no other terms. It seems like that would be part of their discussion. These two, like, I'm giving everything away. And the other one said, but you don't know my excuses. You don't know how much I'm going to lose. I can't know how unfair it is that Jesus asked me to give all this away. And what Chan ended up saying was that eventually, as people sided with the rich young ruler because of Jesus' unfairness, Zacchaeus would leave the class, say, no, can't stay in here with this. And I think that's a lesson for us as I read this last little bit. We're offered forgiveness on no other terms. It's like, take it or leave it. Don't come to me and ask for a compromise. That's the way it is.
Yeah, that's a hard saying, and that's the one I think of all the things that Lewis says here in this I think that's the one that sticks out at me and like slapped upside the head and says, "Pay attention."
Yeah.
I want to say a word about the rich young ruler.
Yes, please.
We don't really know what he did. We just know he was sad when Jesus asked him to do something. I've been sad. Jesus has asked me to do a lot of stuff that I've been really sad about, but I've done it.
Yeah.
So you just,
well, let's give him credit. Yeah.
Let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see him up there. And
well, even if he didn't repent,
walked away.
Yeah.
even if he walked away in this life.
Yeah.
Let's remember Emeth.
Yeah.
From the last battle.
But he didn't walk away though. He gave everything to Tosh. That's not the same.
But he thought it was.
No, he gave everything he had to the one that he thought he owed it to.
Yes, he did. And Aslan recognized that.
He didn't turn away his head.
But Emeth himself didn't recognize it. Aslan recognized it. But what does Emeth do when he sees Aslan? Falls down before him and begs to be slain as an infidel.
As I recall, George MacDonald preached a sermon on the rich young ruler in his Unspoken Sermons. It's in that collection. And I think I remember MacDonald making a case for the rich young ruler having repented. But I don't remember what the case was.
Well, good for MacDonald.
Good. Yeah, and I agree with you, Janet.
Every time I read a C.S. Lewis sermon, I'm impressed by the difference between his sermons in the 40s and sermons today.
Yeah.
Here.
Can you imagine preaching one of these cerebral philosophical treatises?
You should read some of John Donne's sermons.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
They're so.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're. It's like unpacking them. I'm sitting there reading and going. I'm like, I wouldn't be able to keep up with the thought from what he's saying. I need to read this.
Mm.
Yep.
But I'm glad he preached them and wrote them down.
Yep.
And next month we'll have to get started quicker because it's a third longer than this one.
Yeah. Yeah, we will. We'll have to.
Well, we finished this half an hour early though, so that helps.
Yeah, well, it's later in Louisville than it
We
is.
finished it fully 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, we got 3 people in the Eastern time zone here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know.
But I would like to say, and I'm sorry that I was late, but I went to talk to somebody about a job, which I'm not going to have. So if anybody wants to give me a job, would you please give me a call? There's blah, 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 blah. I'm the person that set up the website, the Facebook page, and I have just been terrible about keeping it up. And I know that I'm going to continue to be terrible. And Barry's an administrator, but he doesn't need to be doing that monthly stuff either. So if there's somebody that's interested in, putting the announcements on the Facebook page every month, just let me know and I will make you an administrator and you can do it.
Well, the Facebook page can actually be a lot more than that. And I know this is odd coming from me who despises Facebook. But if we're going to do it, and we need to do it right. And Janet, you've done a great job with it. You have.
How do you know you don't ever see it?
I did. I saw it the other day.
But Don puts a lot of stuff on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that before you got on, that Don is kind of like sitting in his command chair, just
The catbird seat.
and posting things. So he's going to get it up there all the time anyway. So I would give him administrative privileges to share with you.
I had Don in mind. I thought I'd let him volunteer, but okay.
Volunteer.
Yeah.
All right. I would suggest that you have more than just 2, maybe 3 people involved.
Richard follows it a good bit. So maybe Richard and
anyway, they need to all be volunteers for sure.
Yeah. And by the way, I heard from Israel this week. He said, tell everybody hello. He hopes to see us soon. So
very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Did I say something about Rebecca and the baby last month? I can't remember.
I don't remember it.
Okay. Several of y'all have met my daughter, my youngest daughter, Rebecca. She used to go to the meetings when she was a young teenager. And she's the one that's 32. She has had 4 miscarriages, and the baby that she has a 5-year-old who was very, very sick. And that whole pregnancy was traumatic, and then 5 months in the NICU, but she's fine now. But what I'm saying is she's never had a regular pregnancy. She's never been able to just take a baby home from the hospital and have that time. And so now she's 2 months pregnant. And so I'm just shameless about asking like people in the street to pray for her. So please do keep her in your prayers.
Certainly. Thank you, Janet.
We will, Janet. Thank you for sharing that.
Good.
Wow. I think the world of her. I love Rebecca. She's just a good kid. Good kid.
Very special lady.
Yeah. All right.
Yes, yes,
Anything
sir.
else before we go, or Dennis, you want to? I mean, we don't have to go up to 9 o'clock, but since we've got 10 o'clock in Eastern time, so. But I do want to give everybody a chance to say anything else, and keep an eye on the emails for when you get your copy of the Chronicle.
Well, I have one quick question. It will be quick, but other than that, I think we need to show mercy on the people in the Eastern time zone. The question is this: for any of you who have ever written anything, either for publication or for a presentation, a sermon, anything, when it's all over with and you prepare it and you think it's really right, it's really what you want to say, and then often as little as a week later or a month later or 2 months later, you look at it again and you go, oh, if only I had known to put this in, it would have been so much better.
Very
No
normal.
matter how, yeah, that the thing that I wrote for the Chronicle of C.S. Lewis studies that we're about to publish. When I wrote it, I thought, I will never do any better than this. And yet, if what we did tonight just makes me go, oh, I could have said that so much better. If only I'd taken this into account.
Very normal.
I often say when I do a presentation or a lesson, what you're getting is what you're getting now. It's not what you would have gotten 10 years ago. It's not what you will get 10 years from now, but it's what you're getting now.
Yeah,
well,
good point.
That's a good way to look at it.
And Lewis said every time he gave a witness a speech, he always felt that he could have done better.
I guess I'm in pretty good company, huh?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Dennis, you're not alone in that at all. And in fact, I was listening to a podcast with two very successful novelists, and they got to talking about that. And they were saying, once it's done, it's done. You gotta let it go.
And that's what Tolkien couldn't do. Tolkien couldn't let it go. He was shamed into publishing, and he kept saying it's not ready. But of course it was.
Well, Thomas Aquinas thought that too.
Yeah. We're all in real good company now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll close it out, and we will look at the other article, the other chapter.
Barry?
Yes?
Barry, you might want to look at that email I sent you. There are two additional letters that Lewis wrote on the subject of forgiveness. One was to his brother, and the other was to Mary Van Drusen. And the one to Mary Van Drusen was like 5 months before he died. And it's very, I think, revealing.
Did you send me the links to that?
I sent you the actual document.
Okay, great. Well, in that case, I will include that. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Doc. Information Central, just like I told you. He's in constant research mode. That's what I love about Don. So, okay, I will include that. All right. Anything else? All right. With that, blessings to all of you, and we'll see you on October the 10th, 7 o'clock.
All righty.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
See y'all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.